Opinions expressed during the show are not necessarily those of the staff, management, or ownership of WGCH Radio.
Good morning and welcome to Women's eNews Live. This is our first of our bi-weekly shows that will bring to life the stories from Women's eNews national and international correspondents and women and teen activists and storytellers from around the world. I'm Lori Sokol, your host and Executive Director of Women's eNews, and if you weren't aware of our daily news service that has been bringing the latest news about women and girls written by women and girls throughout the globe every day for the past 16 years, I invite you to visit our website, womensenews.org, and take a look. I promise from the first sight you will be hooked. And now I'm very pleased to welcome today's guest, Jacqueline Ebanks, Executive Director of the Women's City Club of New York. Now, to give our listeners a little history about the Women's City Club of New York, the organization is now celebrating its 100th year, having a history of activism with members like Eleanor Roosevelt and U.S. Labor Secretary Frances Perkins, who, as we know, very highly accomplished women in our history. And it's interesting, 100 years ago, if we look back and then we look at where we are today, women didn't have the right to vote even 100 years ago. So I'd like to ask you, and welcome, Jackie, to our show. I'd like to ask you about the last 100 years, the history, although we know you haven't been around for 100 years. If you did, you look absolutely amazing. Let's talk to our listeners about how far we've come in those 100 years, and also how far we still need to go.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori. It is a pleasure to be here. And first, let me congratulate you and Women's eNews for establishing this program. We wish you tremendous success. It is clearly going to be a well-needed resource for us in the women's community because it will amplify women's voices on critical issues. And so we're really grateful. And of course, on behalf of the members of the Women's City Club, we are particularly pleased to be your first guest.
So, welcome. We're pleased as well.
Thank you. You're right. I haven't been around for 100 years.
Although sometimes it feels
sometimes it can. I think one of the things we today live clearly on the successes of the women before us. And it's not just those who started 100 years ago, but as you follow up through the women's movement in the 70s to the 80s. And as such, we are very successful in that we now have the right to vote, we work, we have our own credit, we own our own businesses, although those have many different challenges. And clearly challenges remain in terms of pay equity, in terms of women securing leadership positions, both in politics and in civic life, and in business. And so there are many avenues on which we still have to push forward.
And let's not forget that we still don't have the Equal Rights Amendment as part of our Constitution.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so for this generation, and as WCC looks forward to its second century of work, then we think about women being present at every table in order to be influential on all issues that affect the globe. We're not sequestered into any one particular issue, but women bring a lot to the table, and we want that to be maximized throughout our lifetime.
Now let's talk about the importance for women's voices to be maximized. Of course, we know how that's helpful to women, to have a seat at the table. But let's talk about the community in general, women and men. How does it help everybody by bringing women's voices to the table?
And I think that's an important point to raise because that is exactly the purpose of the Women's City Club. We're a multi-generational network of women from diverse backgrounds, and we're focused on shaping public policy to improve life for all New Yorkers. And, of course, we live in a region that faces, and the region being the TriState region, where we can track in this region the highest disparity between high-income earners and low-income earners. And we face significant challenges in this region. Women
So when you're talking about the region, you're talking about the New York Tri-State.
New York Tri-State region.
Which includes Connecticut,
Jersey, and New York State. I think one of the things we recognize is that women are very often disproportionately impacted by the negative issues facing us. As caretakers, we earn less. As we age, we find that we are in deeper poverty.
And we live longer.
And so Women's City Club, we determined that there are really 5 areas we want to focus on as an institution, because we believe that when we address issues through these areas, we're able to work comprehensively and holistically at creating social change. So
let's talk about those 5 areas.
The 5 areas are what we call good government, i.e., how do you improve government performance so that government is more transparent and accessible and responsive to the voice of citizens. We care very much about health and the importance of accessing quality, affordable care so that with good health, you're able to address the other issues in
and we're
life.
Talking about physical health as well as
mental health, reproductive health.
Reproductive health. That's very important.
Mm-hmm. Then, of course, housing and homelessness. We've seen, unfortunately and regrettably, the spike in homelessness and the spike in the increased cost of housing.
Where do you see that spike emanating from?
It has multiple sources, I think, right? When you look at construction, not factoring sort of the lowest wage earners, the fact that wages are stagnant,
yes,
and so people aren't able to acquire what's there. I think the root, of course, is the whole inequity in our system, right? And that leads us to our 4th area, which is income inequality.
Yes,
and the need to ensure that workers earn a living wage,
mm-hmm.
and women have access to jobs that give them high pay, that helps ensure their economic stability. And last but not least, public education, public school education, both at the higher level and public and elementary school. The importance of having quality education, the importance of increasing access to that education, because we still believe it is an incredible equalizer, and it opens the gates to many opportunities.
Well, it certainly is an equalizer, and you get to, by providing quality education early, that's how you prevent so many other difficulties and challenges from arising as these children get older. So, and I do want to mention, it's interesting how the reason why I asked how women being in leadership positions help the entire community, all genders, et cetera, because if we look at the 100-year history, for example, when women didn't have the right to vote 100 years ago, and here we are at a point where we have our first woman presidential nominee from a major party. So it is interesting to look at, as you said, how far we've come, but really still how far we still need to go. And
I think the beauty of the Women's City Club of New York and institutions like ours is that it's not simply a one-off deal. This is an ongoing effort to ensure that when we achieve equality and equity, that we're constantly monitoring these issues so that the equity can be sustained. And that's really key. So it means that we need to be civically engaged. And women are, as primary caretakers in families, we really need to have a voice at the table because we see the impact probably more closely than others because of our role in families and as individuals. I think in WCC, that's something that we want to really pursue is building the informed citizen.
Building the very, very good point, the informed citizen. So tell me, so now that we're aware of what your objectives are, how is WCC going about implementing those?
Great. So we have a membership base.
Which I understand is also from throughout the Tri-State area.
Throughout the Tri-State
and
area.
And what is the age range of your membership?
as young as 18 to younger at 98.
Wonderful. Younger at 98. I love it.
And so it's this multi-generational, diverse network of women and a few good men. I would be remiss if I don't articulate that. These women, and we encourage individuals to visit our website for detail on membership. Our website is WCCNY.org. And we come together through public forums. We also have task forces that focus on specific issues within each of our 5 areas. And in these task forces, women study an issue over time. A year or so, doing research, publishing reports, testimonies at City Council, and actually advocating for the change that they have defined that they want to see. We also, in the past year, have been updating our citywide guide to services and resources, which is a tool for individuals in need to connect them to free and low-cost community-based services.
I see it right here. In both Manhattan.
Well, we have Manhattan and Brooklyn now, and by the end of the year, we'll have the remaining boroughs. It is also available online as a searchable database.
Excellent. I particularly want to focus on education. Having been trained as an education psychologist and worked in a variety of schools, it's so clear that, as we said earlier, by getting to individuals as early as possible in their lives is crucial because it prevents so many other issues that can develop later on. So let's talk about education and how your organization addresses that.
Great. We are very concerned at WCC in not only the academic component of education, but how do we build whole individuals who can be truly productive in society. And so we've had task forces in the past 4 years that have focused on the, in quotation marks, the extracurricular components of education. We had a physical education task force that highlighted the fact that in New York City, our schools had not been compliant with regulations that required a number of hours of phys ed for students.
Really?
And that caused the then controller to do a report, a study, and found the gap. That then resulted in a broader coalition of nonprofits coming together, and we now have the ability to measure, document, and to continue this advocacy to ensure that our students are being exposed to and participating in.
And why is that important? Why is physical ed important?
Physical ed is important because we believe that if you healthy mind, healthy body, that there's a connection. And if you keep the student engaged in a fuller way, then you get a better product at all levels. A better student at all levels.
We do feel as parents, certainly they're our products.
They are our products, and as we say, they are the future. And, I want to take a step back to our membership. That's one of the things that WCC and the board of WCC was very concerned about, was the participation of younger women in our organization, and being concerned that younger women had not yet had the opportunity to earn and become financially stable. Women under 35 can be members of WCC at no cost for 2 years.
Well, that eliminates me, unfortunately, but I'm glad.
And so, so, I think that's really something that we have carried forward and look forward to seeing more young women at the table.
As we were just talking, even before the show began, we were talking about the importance of the next generation carrying forth. For example, at Women's eNews, we have Teen Voices is a segment of our organization where information is provided about teen girls around the world. And they are our next generation to carry forward the work that we've done. And clearly, as we've been talking about, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. You had mentioned also reproductive rights. Can you talk to me about WCC and how it's involved in ensuring that for women?
But one of the things linked to our public education focus area is that we have a task force on sex education. Okay. And again, being very concerned that not just girls, but boys, learn and understand the importance of healthy relationships, what that looks like, managing one's body, making choice, consent, all of these things ought to be imparted in an age-appropriate way by a trained health educator.
We were talking about the importance of having a trained educator specifically about that.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And one of the things, again, we want to make sure that in New York City public schools, this is available. And we have had some public forums over the past year where we've had wonderful discussion with nonprofit service providers and other advocacy groups and parents. And I remember one forum that stood out to me was a parent coordinator in public school getting up and asking, well, how do I help our parents understand? And I thought that was just a phenomenal moment for us, and our task force needs to go back and look at this opportunity because it's not only the kids, it's some of us as parents that need to become conversant again on the issue of healthy relationships and sex education.
Absolutely, because it all starts in the home. And education, as good as it can be, can only do so much because the child goes home. And the biggest influence for a child is the home environment. So you and I are both parents. Yeah. And when we first met a few weeks ago, we were talking about, as parents, my children are, our children are all in the 20s. Right? We were talking about the talk, so how we gave the talk to our children, and we were remembering I think mine are now in their mid-20s, but one was, I think, 11 and the other 14, and just thinking back to that time, if I was very comfortable talking to them about it, but a lot of parents are not, and it's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
I also mentioned how I was in Denmark a couple of months ago, and for a Women Deliver conference, where there were women from all over the world speaking about the state of women, the challenges that remain, et cetera, as well as the progress that we've made. And the very last session was hosted by an organization called the Pleasure Project out of, I believe it was the Netherlands. And they were talking about, there was a study that was done along with WHO, the World Health Organization, how teenagers, particularly teenage girls in Denmark, when they are taught sex education in schools, they're not only taught about being safe in terms of preventing pregnancy and also diseases, which is crucial, but also they incorporate into that the importance of experiencing pleasure as part of sex, making a comparison from similarly aged girls in the U.S. where that's not a component, the pleasure part of it, and it showed that in Denmark, the teenage girls were less apt to experience teen pregnancy, less apt to take more initiative to protect themselves during sex. And I think that is, we were talking about that too, the importance of that ties into healthy relationships. Right. It's not just the physical aspect of using a condom or any other way to protect oneself and stay safe, but also the aspect of the importance of having a healthy relationship beyond that, communication, all those other.
Yeah, and I do think that, your experience there underscores for me the importance of having trained health educators. Yes. I'm a parent for whom it wasn't easy to have such talk. And I found ways to kind of be in my daughter's life in a way that I was always discussing life in general.
What do you mean?
But,
in what way did you do that?
Being available to watch certain television shows with that. I wasn't always censoring. There's a point when you can't censor, and so you sit, you watch, you create discussion, and the miracle of the pause button, You can be watching a show, it's finished, but you're still having a discussion, you're 30 minutes behind. So those are the things that, for me,
now it
really work.
If it's on Netflix, you can just stop it completely, have the discussion, and go right back to where you left off.
So I think it's so important, as it became for me, that we all, as a community, need to be engaged in this discussion because we want to look at being able to mitigate against violence acts that happen to women, domestic violence, intimate partner violence. There's so much that we are up against that as women we are disproportionately impacted, that for which a healthy relationship can be a solution. And so we need to figure that out and how we train people from school, public education. And so, I defer a lot to our advocates and coalitions and the members on our task force to really help us figure out the how of doing that. But once we do it, I think we also have to measure impact and outcome and to determine how and if we're being successful.
And that's crucial. How do you measure impact? It's not so easy.
It's not so easy. Okay.
You don't have that yet, so that's okay. Perhaps one of our listeners do, and they can contact you. And again, your website is
WCCNY.org.
Now, I'd like to talk about your Centennial Conference, 100th anniversary coming up in September. What is the date?
It's September 29th, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We're having a conference at the New York Academy of Medicine. Mm-hmm. The topic is From Inequality to Equality, Policies and Programs that Work. And WCC has been focused since inception on addressing the inequities in society. And we continue to do that, but we believe that we have gained and moved up the playing field over the past century. We want to figure out now in the 21st century, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And because it is a journey, it's not sufficient to talk about inequalities. We really need to figure out how are we going to create that change. And probably most importantly, are these solutions scalable so that we can have the greatest impact possible? And that's what we're beginning to look at. We will continue a year-long dialogue after the conference. Again, it's September 29th. We're going to have 4 consecutive workshops addressing issues, disparities in health, issues around education, employment, and income. And housing and homelessness. So those 4.
And they're all interrelated.
They're all interrelated, and probably that's the theme we want to put across most, that these things are all connected. So addressing them in silos probably does more harm than good, or doesn't get us fully to the solution that we seek. And we really need to begin to understand how they're interconnected, and the fact that they impact people differently depending on race, gender, age, geography. I think all of these orientations, we have to be mindful of this as we talk about moving from inequality to equality.
Well, certainly issues have become much more complex in the last 100 years.
So,
but that's fine, and that's actually that shows a level of progress. The fact that we're looking at issues in a more complex way, which is reflective of
the complexity and expressive of the complexity of society. I mean, when women didn't work, but you opened the door, and in a lot of ways, these are problems of success. So as a civic engagement institution, 100 years ago, women were available from 9 to 5 to do this work on a volunteer basis. Now women work. And so that leaves probably 6 to 9. And we have to create that shift so that we continue to be relevant in the 21st century. Quite frankly, without civic engagement, the democracy doesn't work and it doesn't grow. And the work of perfecting our union isn't possible without the participation of its citizens.
And I believe that isn't it true that single mothers represent the largest family demographic in the country today?
I think so, yeah.
Yes. And also recent statistics have shown that the largest group graduating from college are African American women. So things have really changed and progressed in some In some ways.
In some ways it has progressed, but, it's going to stall if we don't address the issues of family care, paid family leave, paid equity. And it's not just about women again, because, men now want the choice, appropriately so, to be able to stay at home, to take care of their kids.
Because we know that when men are similarly involved in the upbringing of their children, everybody benefits. The children benefit, the marriage benefits, community benefits, everybody benefits from that. So they should have the same choices as women are starting to have in the corporate world. But until women are making equal pay, it's not conducive to having men stay home.
Exactly. And I don't want us to get caught in our binary construct because of same-sex families as well. It's the importance of creating flexibility and for our society. And I think it also feeds our economic engine, to be proven. But really, when you do give people equal pay, more disposable income, and opportunity to drive the economy as well.
Well, getting back to the election, now that we're less than fewer than 100 days to go, and as one, I was at the DNC a few weeks ago, and as one of the famous speakers said, "Don't boo, vote." So let's talk about the importance of voting. Women and men getting out there to vote. We're talking about all the things that are challenges that remain. Yeah. And when you say, what can people do?
Yeah, I think it's critically important that we head to the polls, we vote our conscience. It is the opportunity for us to play that critical role in our democracy.
Absolutely. Well, Jacqueline Ebanks, Executive Director, Women's City Club of New York, I want to thank you for being here. The topics we discussed, it's only the beginning. But certainly your organization is doing fabulous work. And please, everybody, I look forward to attending your conference.
Well, yes, please visit our website for details, wccny.org. Thank you so much, Lori, for this opportunity.
You're welcome. And again, this is Lori Sokol from Women's eNews, host of Women's eNews Live. Please also visit our website at womensenews.org to learn more about our organization, the news we provide for women and teen girls, from women and teen girls throughout the world. And we look forward to your tuning in next week, Wednesday at 9 a.m. I'm Lori Sokol for 1490 AM WGCH.
This is David Weiss with a slice of life. Do you know what this sound is? That's the sound of a pit of snakes. A fear of snakes is known as ophidiophobia. And let's be honest, many of us suffer from this. Even Indiana Jones was scared of snakes. Once in a while, a snake can show up